Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today I am joined by Hayden Sargeant. Welcome, Hayden. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on, obviously post Olympic Games where you made your first debut at the Olympics. Congratulations on that journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very exciting.
Now, you are, of course, a local kid, someone that has come from the ground roots of Queensland. I do want to touch on that, but firstly, before we get into your Olympic journey and how you got to that place, for those people that are not aware of who you are, who is Hayden Sargeant and what does he do with himself now?
I'm a current rugby sevens player for Australia. I live in Sydney with my partner, and I guess my main hobby outside of work is surfing. That's probably a little insight.
Perfect Australian, typical lifestyle, just everything's around sport. Now talking about, obviously you made the Olympics this year and were able to go to Paris and compete, but how did that journey come about? Where did it start for you?
Jeez, how long do we have? No, I guess it all started for me probably before COVID. I probably first started playing sevens maybe 2 or 3 years before COVID hit. I signed a development deal before COVID. And as that was coming to the end, COVID kind of hit. And yeah, they said there's no room for you at the moment with all that's happening in the world. So yeah, went back and worked in construction for 4 years. Probably a little part of me thought rugby was finished. But I knew I was so close. So I just kept training. I guess that I just wanted to keep training. And yeah, I got a phone call from the coach almost 2 years ago now when I was in the middle of a finance meeting. And yeah, next thing you know, 2 weeks went by and I flew to Sydney and then I was off to LA for my debut.
Wow. It's so crazy how 1 minute you can be a construction worker and the next you're on the flight to
Yeah,
go and
it
fulfill your
happened.
dreams.
Yeah, it happened so quickly that, you know, I probably didn't have too much time to think about it. It was probably a good thing. It was just, yep, come down and train. Oh, we like what we saw. Here's another week of training. And on the Friday before we left on Sunday, they said, yeah, you're coming away. So it all happened so quickly that it was probably a good thing that I didn't have too much time to overthink things. It just happened and fell into place. So yeah, it was pretty lucky.
Was it hard saying, you mentioned at the start that you started playing rugby sevens and then you had to go back to construction because at the time it wasn't the right timing. Was
Mhm.
that hard to transition knowing that you'd potentially have to give up on your dream?
Absolutely. I probably never thought that though. I thought probably that it was still alive inside of me. I never really thought it was finished. Um, whether it was right or wrong, every part of me believed that I was still going to get another opportunity. I just had to stay ready was the mindset I had in mind.
Mm.
Obviously, it wasn't as easy when you're working full time. But yeah, I just did what I could outside of work to stay fit and healthy.
And when you say you had to stay ready, what does that look like?
It's probably no different to, I guess, what every aspiring athlete's doing outside of work hours. My boss was great at the time at Hutchies. I kind of told him what was happening and, that I was still really keen on footy and he was all for it being an ex-rugby player. So yeah, for me, it was, I would train before work. I would ask to start work early so I could finish early so I could get the afternoon in to finish what I had to do, whether that be gym or a bit of cardio or training, really nothing too hard, but just stuff that all adds up. The more consistent you stay with it.
Mm. And people often talk about the one percenters and being seen in such a competitive environment to make teams like the ones that you did. How do you get seen by, a flooded market? There's so many people that want to make it and that are trying to make it, but how do you become that person that gets seen by the people that need to be looking at you?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. For me, my mindset was always, what am I doing different to everyone else? I used to think, oh, everyone's training of an afternoon, with their club. And if we're all playing on the weekend and we're all doing the same training, how am I going to stand out? So a mindset that used to work for me and used to make me feel confident when I would play is that if I knew I was doing extra work, that I would go out onto the field and be more prepared than other players. Whether I was doing the right training or not, mentally it was just a big win for me that I would go out there knowing I felt confident in what I was doing.
And do you think it's more of a mental game? Obviously, you need physical components to compete in the game of rugby union,
Mhm.
but mentally, do you have to be prepared for that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's almost any aspect in life. If you're willing to put in the work and go that extra mile, I almost believe anything is possible if that's what you truly believe and that's what you want to aspire to do. As long as you are giving it 100%, I reckon you can achieve most things in life.
Mm. And there is the conversation around we see a lot of success stories and we see the highs and the highlight reels, but it's not always the case. And that's not always the linear journey. For you, were there downfalls and how did you manage to get yourself through those times when it wasn't working out?
Yeah, there's plenty. Look, I truthfully don't believe my life has ever been that hard. Sometimes you get in a spiral or things are negative, but I saw Kurt McGrath followed you the other day, and he's an aspiration of mine, and I like to try and pull back a bit and think my life's not that bad. When you see what other people have gone through, I think that's real struggle. And I believe stuff like that helps me get through because sometimes, whether it be work or training, you can get so caught up and emotionally in a bundle of what's happening, you can kind of fall down a rabbit hole in thinking everything's so bad. But if you manage to just take a step back sometimes and I don't know, just look at it from a different perspective, you go, "Oh, it's really not that bad." And that mindset always works for me. But yeah, I had some negative times as well with rugby. I tore my ACL when I was 14. So I had a knee reconstruction, and that was probably one of the toughest times. I think more so because of my age. I probably wasn't mentally mature enough to really understand what I was doing or why I was feeling that way. So yeah, that's a little one that I've had that I look back on and it still helps me today.
Can you talk us through injuries in sport? Because a lot of us on the outside, those bench warmers, the fans, look at people that go through injuries and think, do rehab, it'll be fine, they'll get over it. But we don't actually understand the impact that injuries can have on people that identify as sport as
Hmm.
a big part of them. Like when they get taken out of that game, that loss and that sense of value and identity. Obviously, you were such a young age when you went through that, and maybe you didn't experience, but what does injuries do to players?
Yeah, I've still had little niggles along the way where whether it be a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But yeah, I think the hardest part is you almost feel excluded, especially in a team sport. You go to work or training every day and that's your group of mates and you're almost with each other more than you are with your family. So when you don't get to be a part of that, yeah, it definitely has a mental side effect. You
Mm.
feel like you're on the out, or like I said, it's very easy to fall down a mental, I guess, spiral. And you always think of the worst case when you get injured. I just think everyone almost like when you get injured, everyone thinks, oh, it's the worst case, and you always prepare yourself for worst case scenario. But there always is positives within those negatives, whether it be you get to work on something that you probably didn't have time to, or yeah, I think that's the hardest part. You just feel excluded from your core group of mates.
Almost like FOMO.
Yeah, pretty much.
And rugby union, if we go back to the grassroots of, obviously you said you loved playing sport, you love surfing. Why rugby union? What pulled you to start playing that sport?
It's a funny one. I was probably about 9 or 10, and my neighbor at the time used to come over and we'd play touch footy in our backyard. And at that point, I was only playing soccer. And I remember he used to tease me for playing soccer. So he was a bit older than I was, and he had an older brother. And I was like, I'll show you. Like, I didn't know any different at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that year I went down and joined his team. So I played up a few years in rugby just so I could play tackle. And yeah, that's how it started, really.
Did you realize at the start that you were going to play this sport for a long time and that you thoroughly enjoyed it?
Probably not at that age. I probably just did it more because my mates did it, and that's what we did
Mm.
over winter. I was lucky enough that my dad was the coach. And then in summertime, we had the kind of same core group of players that would go do nippers together at Mermaid Beach. And I think it was more about fun at that age than it was thinking this is going to be my long-term goal. But there was definitely a part of me that said I want to represent Australia. I remember my pop taking me to an Australian game, and it was a full capacity when the Wallabies were the absolute pinnacle of Australian sport. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
So when do you think it changed for you when you thought, this could be a serious lifelong goal for me. I could really do something with this sport.
Maybe the year that I did my ACL, I was playing quite well, and I know I was obviously very young. But when I was injured, I guess I had the choice to think, I'm going to do this properly and try and make it all worthwhile. Or, I could have been lazy at that age and taken the easier road. But no, I think that was my driving factor. Is I was like, I think I can make something of it. And then obviously, as I progressed through the years, and the more you speak to different people, the more you get better advice, and people start saying, "Oh, you can do this, you can do that," and yeah, I just think there was a little internal flame inside of me that lit, and yeah, just kept burning, and it still is burning today.
Did you think that Olympics or being an Olympic athlete would ever be something that you would become?
Not really. It wasn't really till the last few years that I really thought of the possibility that that was going to come true. 15s was always the goal of mine, to play for the Wallabies and represent Australia, and that was a really strong desire. And it wasn't until I was maybe about 20 that someone even mentioned, "Oh, you might go all right at rugby sevens." So yeah, it was a coach when I was living down in Melbourne at the time that kind of you know started that conversation of playing rugby sevens. And yeah, of course, you talk about it when someone mentions it. It's an Olympic sport, it's a Commonwealth Games sport. So yeah, as I developed a little bit more, of course, it became more and more of a topic. But I guess it kind of got hushed pretty quickly when I was working back in construction. It probably dimmed down a little bit, and I thought, oh, if it happens, it happens. But yeah, I probably wasn't set on it when I was working full time, just thinking it might be over.
Is there a big jump between, playing club rugby to then training and performing at an elite level like the sevens and like for the Australian team? Like, what's the jump between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. You probably just have to ask our strength and conditioning coach when I first came in how unfit and how much I was struggling. He'll probably have a laugh if he listens to this. But yeah, definitely. I just think it's such a difference when you get to work on your body full time every day. I think that just makes such a big difference to your performance. And I didn't realize it at the time when you're working, because you're just trying so hard. But yeah, when you get to put your whole focus on your body and recovery and training well, yeah, I think it makes a big difference. And I think that's the difference between that club rugby and elite level performance. Just the difference that you get to really work on your body. And I think it shows out there on the field.
Is that Does that also take a toll on your body physically though? Like, do you get tired and drained because it is full time?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, or most times, I get home of an afternoon and I am drained. I'm happy to sit down on the couch for the afternoon and throw the ball with our dog. Yeah, usually when we finish training, I don't have too much left to do too many other activities.
Mm. People often talk about when they do something for quite long periods of time and quite excessively that they fall out of love with it. Do you think you'll ever get to that stage, or have you felt like you've gotten to that stage because it is so much?
When I was younger, I definitely felt that a little bit. I had a year of club rugby where I think we might have only won 4 games, um, and continually losing was really tough. It makes you question, like, why am I doing it? And yeah, you get to the point where you question it or I did used to question it, thinking, am I doing it because I like it, or am I doing it because I'm good at it? Were the two questions I probably used to ask, mainly in that period of when we were losing, just because it was tough to continually rock up and know that we didn't have the strongest side. But after that year, I probably learnt more valuable lessons than I did in 3 years before that when we were winning all the time. And then, yeah, when I got this opportunity, it really, relit that love for the game, realized why I loved it. And, it just almost brings out my inner child.
Mm. That's amazing. And it's such important, I think, those two questions that you mentioned. And kudos to you at such a young age to be able to ask yourself those questions. Were you ever afraid of how you were going to answer them, though? That if you were going to say that you didn't love it anymore, what that meant for you?
Yeah, for sure. I guess for me, I always used to think, I always loved telling people that they can do stuff, like trying to give other people a bit of belief. And I remember I always used to think, how am I expected to tell people that if I didn't do it myself? So I guess that was an always internal driver for me. Like, it's silly enough, but I used to think, oh, like, how am I expected to tell my kids if I have kids one day that they can do it, thinking they might turn around and say, oh, like, what would you know? You never did it. So yeah, that was always something that drove me inside to think, I want to prove to even my younger brother, I want to prove to him that he can do whatever he wants in life as long as he tries hard and commits to it fully. You can achieve whatever you want.
I think that's almost the important message there is committing to it fully.
Mm,
Because a lot of us want to commit halfway or commit to the success, and when it does get hard, that's when we run away or we
yeah.
we don't want to commit because even though there's so many pivotal lessons in those hard times, it's hard to stay and it's hard to keep going. And when you said, you kept losing and you still kept turning up and still kept finding a way to compete and be part of the sport. How did you continue to turn up knowing that you could face another loss and the feelings that come with that through anything in life, honestly, not just sport, but when people constantly get caught up in the battles of losses, how did you find a way to just keep going?
I probably didn't find that one too hard because I'm naturally a competitor. I guess every week we lost kind of fueled me more
Mm.
to want to prove people wrong or prove to our side that we can do it. So yeah, it obviously sucks when you lose, but I guess more of me felt driven when we would lose to
Mm.
try and prove a point that following week. That was the good thing about club footy. You lose one week and you've always got the next week to make a difference or prove people wrong. So I never really struggled with that too much because I was such a competitor
Mm.
in whatever it was that, yeah, I just wanted to prove people wrong all the time. I used to
Mm.
love that
Mm.
feeling when someone would say you can't do it. And yeah, that always used to drive me to prove them wrong and remember the people that used to say it.
Yeah, it's an evil driver that proving people
Yeah,
wrong.
absolutely.
Is there a different weight to a loss from, as you said, consecutive losses in club footy to a loss on an Olympic stage with an Australian jersey on, knowing that you can't come back the next week and prove everybody wrong? You have one chance. How do you face that loss and that mindset, knowing, as I said, you can't come back and do it all over again?
Yeah, absolutely. I almost look back and laugh now at how upset I used to get at club games, thinking, why did I get upset at that? It's just club rugby. I was doing it for fun. But yeah, it definitely is harder when you've got the gold jersey on. I like to think that we're representing, or we are representing Australia, and that majority of people are watching if they can. So yeah, I feel really disappointed when we lose that. Sometimes I feel like not only have I let myself down or our team down, that we've let down Australia as a whole. So yeah, it's definitely harder, especially because in sevens you don't get those opportunities all the time. And the Olympics once every 4 years, a loss is heartbreaking. Like some of us might not ever get that chance again. So yeah, it was really tough to swallow following our two losses on finals day. But I'm still really proud of the journey that no one gets to see leading up to that. That's probably the overriding factor that brings me a lot of joy, the hard work and the journey we went through to put ourselves in that position was probably better than, well, probably outweighed the loss, I guess.
And for those people that didn't see the journey prior, how would you describe that journey?
Long and grueling, pretty tough. It's probably the only way to describe it. I don't know how else to describe it. The fitness and continual repetitive like flogging of yourself was brutal. That's probably the only way to describe it. I think everyone gets to see the shining light at the end where the Olympics are shown, and but yeah, the lead up to it is tough, not only physically but mentally. You try and avoid the conversation of the Olympics because it can swallow you up if you overthink it all. But sometimes you can't avoid it, for the month or 2 months leading into the Olympics, even before selection was announced. You're seeing the ads on the TV every night. As much as you're trying to avoid it, it's in your face. It's such a big event. So
Mm.
yeah, that was probably the tough side of it.
Did you feel the pressure?
Um, Not too badly. I'm pretty good at, I guess, finding a block or keeping away from it. And I think that's why I love surfing so much. It's my alone time and time where you get to switch off. But to say there's no pressure, I think people would be lying. It's such a big event, and people who have never spoke to me about footy are messaging me about rugby all of a sudden. So yeah, there's definitely more of an added pressure to it.
Mm. And then talking about the actual Olympic experience when you're playing the game, How would you do, like, what did you take away personally from your Olympic experience?
I thought it was surreal, to be honest. It was the biggest crowd I've ever played in, and we jokingly said after the first game, it felt like a video game.
Mm.
Was the only way I really know how to describe it. Just when we ran out, and to hear the roar of the crowd was, yeah, just incredible. 80,000 full house was something I've never experienced and something I'll never forget. So I don't really know how to put it into words just yet, but surreal is probably the
Mm.
only way I know how to describe it.
Mm. And post Olympics, what works out? Because a lot of the time, we see the game play out and then that's the end. We don't
Mhm.
know what happens next. But what happens when you guys have finished your Olympic journey? And then where does that leave players and where does that leave the team?
Mhm. It's pretty detailed. I guess it's probably different for each code or each sport. I guess for us, we obviously finished the games, and after Tokyo, I think they financially realized how much money they can save by kicking athletes out. I think it used to be that athletes were there from start to finish. So now you have 48 hours from when you finish your event to pack up and move out, essentially.
Mm.
You're more than welcome to come back for the closing ceremony, but most of our boys were long gone by then because I think it was 2 weeks following when we finished that closing ceremony. So that's kind of the wrap up in the village. Um, but for rugby, I guess as a team sport, and we play every year, I guess it probably depends for a few boys on their contracts for how long they are for. So yeah, for some boys, that was the last game they'll get to play for Australia, which is crazy to think of. You finish and then that's it. So I guess that's how it works, really.
Mm. And for you, what does that look like after, you've hit the Olympics, you've made the Australian teams, you've hit all these highs in your rugby union career? What do you want to do next, or where's your next point?
Um, don't know yet. I don't know. There's a couple of goals I hopefully have lined up, but at the moment it's I'll be sticking around for another year at the moment with rugby sevens. Yeah, my sole focus will be just doing the best I can for the Australian team.
Mm, incredible. And as you said, the pride in wearing that green and gold jersey must just feel absolutely amazing knowing that you're not only representing your country but come so far as well from, doing the hard work. And congratulations to you on that journey as well as and never giving up and just keeping at it and giving it a go.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I'll never forget the first time I put the jersey on, as you described. I was an emotional wreck, and just I guess so proud of what I went through, and to get where I wanted to be was, yeah, something extremely incredible, and yeah, definitely a moment I'll never forget.
Mm. If you could sum up your rugby union or your playing career in a sentence, I know it's hard, obviously, to
Mm.
just do it in a sentence, but what would it look like for you?
What would it look like? Maybe a roller coaster with a light at the end of the tunnel combined, maybe. It's probably the only way I can probably sum up my experiences or my career thus far.
Mm.
Um, and it's easy to get caught up in that roller coaster. But yeah, I was lucky enough to ride it out and got to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm. And that's so often, I know we've touched on this a bit throughout this podcast, but that it's not linear. It's that up and down and it really, I think it makes a player, it's when whether or not they're able to stick that out and to see it through. And there are some that you're going to lose along the way, but if you just really keep at it, you can find that light and that light might change as well. As you said, you didn't start off playing sevens, but then you eventuated into that and look where it got you. It's on that
Yeah,
big stage.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think many things in life are linear, unfortunately.
No.
No matter what you're doing, I always think there's going to be highs and lows of whatever it is you're doing or working on or achieving or working to achieve. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with, if you're willing to ride that out and commit to it, then I think you should be all right.
Mm. Would you do anything differently?
Nah, no.
Mm.
Sure, there's probably a couple of decisions I'd change. But no, I like the idea of, it's kind of made me who I am. Like I mentioned those losses before, it's easy to think, should I have changed clubs? But then I also don't think I'd be as resilient as I am today, having gone through that.
Mm.
So no, I like the idea of what you've gone through makes you who you are, and it creates you essentially, I think.
Mm. And there is a big pull around sport, specifically athletes, that they identify as part of their sport. And when that gets taken away, a lot of them feel like, what do I have left? What do I have to bring?
Mhm.
Do you know what you would be able to bring, what you would do if rugby was taken away tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm lucky enough that, like you're saying, I wouldn't change anything with what happened during COVID. I found a love in construction, and I found a really good work crew, and, they really aspired me to be good at that as well. So yeah, that's something I really look forward to for life after rugby, is going back into that area of construction and working on high rises or buildings or whatever it may be. And yeah, have a real love for that as well. And that's something that was only really sparked because of COVID. So yeah, that's what I think I'd do with my
Mm.
life after footy.
Can you live the best of both worlds? I mean, you mentioned before that when you started, I mean, you were in construction and then you were also fitting in rugby and it was a lot. Can you get to a stage where everyday person can work two jobs while they're also trying to fulfill their dream? Is that a sustainable balance for people?
It probably depends on your time period. I don't think you could do that forever. I think you'd eventually burn out, like you said, how people get into a sport at a young age and eventually end up burnt out. So I probably don't think that would be possible. I also kind of like putting most of my eggs in one basket. Like I said, if you commit fully to it, then you can do that. So I don't think it'd be sustainable full time. But yeah, sure, maybe when I'm finished footy, there'll be the odd touch game on the side, or
Mm.
the odd rugby game. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible, but just not both of them being full time.
Mm. And now rugby union is brutal on your body.
Mhm.
Do you ever think about the impacts long term and how that could affect you physically? Obviously, there's a lot of conversations around concussions and things in all sports, but I'm interested to hear if players actually think about the long-term effects of what they put their bodies through can affect them later down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it all the time. I never used to as a kid. You probably think you're invincible when you're a little bit younger and a little bit immature. But no, definitely as you get older, and you hit it on the head there with the CTE and concussion, you probably start to look into that a little bit more than what you ever used to. So I think as you get older, I think everyone does. I think people would be lying if they said they didn't think about it.
Mm. Is it something that impacts the way you play a game?
No, not for me. I've heard it from older guys that are probably closer to retirement, where their mindset evolves or changes, whether they have kids and they're worried about the longevity of with their family, or it doesn't affect me yet, I might add, because everyone who's older seems to talk about it. But not personally, no.
Mm. It is interesting because obviously there is a lot of conversations at Spark, and I always just wonder if it does cross players' minds. I mean, it's
Mhm.
constantly in the media and whether or not they think about the physical long-term effects. And it's hard, I get it, because I mean, even myself, I don't think about my future self much. It's more
Yeah.
you're living in the moment. So completely understandable. But yeah, it is such a topic at the moment of protecting players. But this has been a phenomenal conversation. I do want to end on some quick questions
Mhm.
just about your story and also some advice to those people that are currently where you were or where you are now. Firstly, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you have taken away in your journey thus far?
The one on self-belief, I think, is definitely it's maybe a combination of resilience and self-belief. I just found it, related so perfectly to my work and to my sport, that I was achieving to do that. If you really do go hard, and the saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable, if you're willing to push through that barrier, I really think you can achieve most things in life.
It is so important. And unfortunately, the only ways to learn those lessons
Yeah.
are, as you said, to be uncomfortable and to face things that you don't want to face.
Yeah.
Very, very important. And for someone that is currently where you were, they could be
Mhm.
playing a club sport for them, and they're seeing so many lows. They don't know if they love the sport anymore. They don't know if they want to keep going. What would be your message to them?
I guess my question or message to them is, what are you doing different? You know, how are you going to stand out? If you're doing the same thing and you're not getting any different results, then something needs to change. That's what my mum always used to say to me. If you're doing the same thing and not getting a different answer, then obviously something needs to change. So yeah, I think that self-belief comes from, or it helped me by knowing that I was doing more than the person next to me to get ahead.
So listen to your parents, I feel like is a big one thing.
Yeah, that's always a good one.
Uh, in that quickly though, there's obviously got to be sacrifices that you had to make throughout your journey in order to commit to your sport. How
Yeah.
do you navigate that as a young person that has so many influences in their life
Mhm.
and that, sometimes you want to just go out and have some drinks with some mates or you want to go out the next day and see people and do things. How do you switch off from, getting your socialization in and having that, what people say, have a life, to
Mhm.
committing to a goal? Did you struggle with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's tough. And as much as we can sit here and talk about it, I think the only way that I found out was going through it. But I guess for me, I always put my goal above a short-term gain, if that's what you want to call it, or a short-term little high.
Mm.
That was always well above, a party, or, there's plenty of family holidays that I didn't get to go on because I had sport or little things like that. But yeah, unfortunately, I think when you're young, the only way to learn is to
Mm.
go through it, to think, oh, nothing really happened at that party that I majorly missed out on.
With where you're at now, what would you think that your 14-year-old self or your younger self would say to you if they could see who you have become today?
Jeez. And then maybe we did it. Probably a hug would do more justice than any words, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And the number one, lastly, I know I keep coming up with like last questions, but lastly, what is a number one daily practice that, and maybe you don't have a daily practice, but a number one thing that you think is necessary for yourself or for people that you would offer to implement every day in order to be the best version of yourself or to turn up as the person that you are?
Not sure, to be truthful on that one. I tried journaling, that wasn't for me. I tried meditation, that really didn't work for me either. I don't know, I guess just taking a step back sometimes is probably the thing that's worked best for me.
Perspective, as you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, which I think is important as well because sometimes things don't work for everyone. And
Mm,
so often we're like, everybody should meditate and everybody should journal, but sometimes it doesn't work. I know I'm not
mm,
amazing at either of the two, and some
yeah.
days they work and some days they don't. But I think it's really important to find what works for you. And if you found your practice and it's making you feel good and it's making you turn up as your best version every day, then I don't think you're going wrong.
Yeah. Actually, you kind of almost brought it up then. I know if I have a good night's sleep, that's kind of my
Mm,
number one. If I don't get caught on my phone all night,
mm,
I'm pretty early to bed and early to rise. So
mm.
if I go to bed early, I'll know I wake up generally having a pretty good day.
So if you're not getting sleep and you're up cranky, we know why.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for jumping on today and sharing your story. And congratulations, as I said, on your journey, where you've started to where you are now and how you've navigated all of it through the pressure of, as I said, not just club footy, but making it to the Olympic stage and representing Australia. It's such a monumental experience to go through and something that you've achieved through that self-belief and resilience that you stuck at it and you went through it, and you should be so proud. And I'm so glad that we were able to start this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. And thank you as well for everyone else for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. We'll catch you guys all next time.